Okay,
Okay.
I want to comment about two aspects of Jason's charge. Jason asked us to talk about what happens when we age as scholars and do we leave behind our legacy, our intellectual legacy. I'd like to talk about two aspects of that, the personal aspect and the professional aspect. The personal aspect, I think, is worth talking about because I don't think it's understood what happens to older people when they start failing. I'm 92 years old, and well, I noticed when I reached 80 or so that all of my physical systems started to degrade. Sight, hearing, strength, and lately it's been especially disturbing to find that my voice is becoming uh, uh, labored. It's hard to speak. It makes you realize how speaking takes energy. It takes hard work to speak. And I find it's hard to speak now, which is very disturbing for a professor, for a scholar who's used to giving talks that are supposed to be brilliant and moving. To find that the voice is failing, that's very difficult. Uh, that's all I want to say about that. So let me move to the professional aspect. Um, when I started as a scholar, I was at Berkeley. I was a graduate student. That's where I got my PhD, and it was in the early 1960s during the free speech movement, and the that was the beginning of the digital revolution. The first computers came out then. I was very impressed with that. And I could see that the computer was going to change the world. It became so obvious to me. And that was the time when Alvin Toffler brought out Future Shock and uh, the Post-Industrial Society was a best-selling book. And The Glove of Rome brought out the limits to growth. So I was very absorbed with that. It just caught my attention, mainly because it made me think, yes, society is changing dramatically. To what? What is it changing to? If it's changing, where's it going? That just really, I couldn't avoid that fundamental question. It's so profound. And that has captivated my attention for 50 years. Um, what I did is I started forecasting the technology revolution, all of it, everything, 50 different technologies in my TechHash project, which was a big hit. I think it's one of the best forecasting systems in the world. Uh, and what I began to see was that it was beyond the technology itself, that the technology was changing society so dramatically that it was introducing consciousness. And that's one of the major contributions I made. Let me show you slide to just one simple slide to make that point. Can I share?
Yeah, there's a green button on under the screen. It says share.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, good. Okay.
And if you have multiple screens, you
Yeah, here,
choose
there's it.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's there.
I wonder if I could make this bigger. Yes, good, good.
Yeah, it's pretty big now.
Yeah, let me get them. Okay. And I'm very proud of this. I think this accurately describes the life cycle of civilization from a social evolution perspective. Let me just adjust this a little bit. I want you to see the bottom scale. To do this, I had to use a logarithmic scale. Why am I having trouble with this? Ah, sorry. Oh my God, what happened here? Ah, ah.
You closed it. Very similar to Carl Sagan's perspective.
What is this happening? Why is that happening?
We are now seeing from 1 to 7.
Be patient. I'll get this.
Yeah.
Reduce the zoom in PowerPoint.
Well, this is
We are now seeing the title up, yeah, and it moves with your slides. Yeah, we are now at the bottom of the graph. Yeah,
okay. Well, you can't see this is good enough, I think.
yeah, good enough. Good enough.
Yes, I'm very proud of it.
Perfect enough.
I worked on this for decades, and I published two or three different versions of it. And I think it helps us understand the situation we're facing now as a civilization with these threats that are like Donald Trump, for instance. What this describes is the the path of the life cycle. And to do that, I had to use a logarithmic scale at the bottom, or else you wouldn't see anything. And the vertical scale is simply the various stages of evolution. And this is all historical data, so it's a scientific model. And what you see, I think, is that civilization has followed a precise S curve. An S curve is characteristic of all life forms, of a culture of bacteria, the growth of culture of bacteria, the growth of an infant, or in this case, of life on the planet Earth. It's a very precise life cycle. Life cycles have a takeoff point. The takeoff point was when the great religions occurred at the beginning, around the time of Christ. And that's when society took off, which tells us something that the great religions were essential, I think, for modern societies, that they developed a sense of cooperation, of valuing human welfare, which was a breakthrough in thought. And that enabled societies. And we saw the pivot point in about 1975 when the rate of population growth peaked. And since then, it's been stabilizing. It's stabilizing now to about 10 billion people, I think, in another few decades. And recently, we've seen what I call, beyond knowledge, the maturity crisis. The year 2020 was very critical, I think. Something very significant happened then. It was the insurrection on the US government instigated by Trump, based on the big lie. The first time that a major a major event of that magnitude occurred based upon sheer beliefs, unrelated to fact. There was no rational basis for this. This tells us that we have moved beyond knowledge. Knowledge is no longer the primary focus of attention because the digital revolution is driving attention beyond knowledge. Uh, Social media and AI flood us with information. And so people are forced to make choices about what they are going to focus their attention on. And that's based upon what they feel emotionally, what they like, what they believe, what their values are. And so we're operating beyond knowledge, where subjective consciousness dominates. That, I think, is a crucial understanding. That is, I think, one of the major contributions I've made in my scholarly work. I don't hear anybody else saying this, but I think it's valid. We are now living in the early stages of an age of consciousness. It's just not well understood. Uh, and that tells us also that I think we're moving towards maturity. because all the life cycles mature. And this tells me that the life cycle on this planet is maturing right now. That's what consciousness is about. In a human being, consciousness would occur when the person is ready to become a mature adult and accept responsibility for their behavior and decide what is worth pursuing and deal with reality and lead their life in a coherent, productive fashion. That's where we are now. We are faced with this crisis of global maturity. We have to find a way to have the planet mature, to make it sustainable, to solve these horrible problems of climate change and gross inequality and pandemics and autocracies, all of that. That is the crisis of global maturity. It's like the crisis of a teenager when they face their crisis of maturity, when they have a hard time growing up and they do crazy things. But at some point, they they accept the reality that they want to grow up and they assume responsibility for their behavior and they become reasonable adults. That's about where we are today, I think. Let me stop here and see what do you think? Do you have any questions or comments about this?
I have a comment.
Yes.
It's a very, very, very nice graph. I would, if you ever have time, match it with Sorokin's theory of cultural change. And you will find
The Indian philosopher.
no, he's not Indian. He was
Oh.
Sorokin was a Russian.
Carl Sagan.
Okay.
Yeah, and he lived in the States. He wrote a 4-volume set, Sociocultural Dynamics, and basically he proposed that culture has 2 dimensions, what he called sensate and what he called ideational. And these two are always in conflict. Well, mostly, sometimes they're in harmony. But when you move from ideational to sensate, you get harmony. An example is the Industrial Revolution. And when you move from sensate to ideational, you get a breakdown in culture, you get fragmentation, and you get the 2020s. In my book in 2021, I think part 3 of the book describes in some detail Sorokin's theory and how, and I actually make predictions about where things are going to go. But I think you will find something illuminating comparing this to Sorokin's ideas of the changes in culture over the centuries.
Yes, I think that does make sense. Yes, I can see that. That those are cycles within this bigger cycle. That's the way I would see that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's true.
Well, these are fallouts from the each of these boxes are fallouts from the relationship between the 2 states of culture and the phases they go through.
Yes. Well, the point is that this is, I think, the culmination of my interest 50 years ago when I was at Berkeley trying to figure all of this out. Where is the world going? And this is, to me, an explanation of where the world is going. To me, it has great significance. It's the foundation, the conceptual foundation for my 8th book, which will be out in a few months, called One World with a question mark. I recognize the doubt of the world maturing into a global unified world. So there's a question mark in the title, and it's an honest evaluation of the forces driving unification like this, and the opposing forces, the autocracy and the apathy and all of that stuff. So that is my legacy. My One World is going to be my intellectual legacy. Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, it's good to see you again. It's been many, many years since I've listened
Yes,
to you.
yes.
Many years.
It makes me think of Stuart's seminars.
Exactly, exactly. Wonderful days back then. Wonderful days.
Yeah.
Uh, so I, I I look at your graph, and as you know, I'm a biochemist and a biologist or geneticist, whatever. Uh, and I question what are the control variables or what are the primary causal factors which lead you to plot these points. In other words, introspection obviously is a good part of it, but there must be also some other aspects of your observations about history that lead you to locate these points at these times in terms of these terms that you list on the left-hand side. Not that I'm disagreeing with your graph, I just want to understand better what led you internally to reach these very potent conclusions.
Well, as I said, I was just fascinated with the fact that with the realization 50 years ago at Berkeley that the world is not static, that it's changing. And so I started exploring it, and I realized that there were these various stages of development that are very precisely defined. The biological age when life developed and developed human beings, and then the agrarian age, and they're very precise, they're well defined. Futurists have talked about this for decades. What I've done is take it to a conclusion. We know we've been in a knowledge age since the year 2000. I forecast that in the 1970s when I was a young professor. Uh, there were the first signs of PCs were coming out, and I would tell people, I think that was when computers filled entire rooms. And I would tell people, I think we're going to be using personal computers. And the typical response was, why would anybody want a personal computer? Which illustrates how hard it is to imagine these changes. It was impossible to imagine that we would make computers an ordinary part of life. And something like that is happening now. We can't understand an age of consciousness. And I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I think it's here now. And I'm trying to understand it. And what I see is that consciousness is, despite the popular belief, it's not enlightenment, it's everything, the good and the bad, Trump, all the craziness. That's all consciousness. It's all subjective.
So you see
And
this then? Yeah. Okay. So I understand better now why you use the word revolution as opposed to emergence. Uh,
well, you
and
could use, you
see
could,
just
I don't,
a sharp change in the overall structure in some sense. But
well, you could
then,
think, yeah, I'm not going to, I don't think we should argue about revolution versus evolution or emergence. It
okay,
amounts to the same thing.
okay. Uh, then the question would be, how do you see the Gaia hypothesis playing in here? Is that integral to your thinking about this, or
Well,
is
it
it?
is. It is. Uh, uh, you could expand on this really to talk on. See, I think the solution is what I think of as global consciousness. In an age of consciousness, what we need is to form a consciousness, a universal consciousness that we can all share, something that is commonly accepted, some basic principles, like a global ethics. That's the challenge today. The old world order of the unipolar world dominated by the US is dead. And we need a new global order. And that global order has to be based upon the recognition that life is interdependent. All of us are part of a single system, the globe. And that leads to the need for a global consciousness, for people to accept that broadly, which is not hard to do. And I forecast things like this. I use my TechCast experts. We estimate a global consciousness is likely to emerge about 2033, plus or minus about 5 years, at a modest probability, about a 65% probability, because of the doubt. There's such enormous doubt. So it may not happen, of course. I want to be clear about this, but I think it is likely to happen. And I think it's likely to happen in a decade or so and change the world dramatically.
One more
Sorry.
question before then I'll stop. And that is, what are the implications of this form of thinking or your form of thinking with regard to the nature of physical forces and their role in human behavior? By physical forces, I mean here that which the engineering community, the physics community, and often the mathematics community see as the controlling factors. Does this imply that ever weaker forces are going to predominate in the future?
That's the relationship between knowledge and consciousness that's speaking about, Jerry. I think that's a good point. This does not diminish the importance of knowledge. Knowledge is foundational, no question about that. But the fact is, consciousness supersedes knowledge. People believe first, and then they assume knowledge to suit their convenience. That's what we're seeing in the Trump phenomena. People can believe the craziest things if they're convinced of it. And so the challenge is to first tame consciousness the way we've tamed the physical world. And then we can use the knowledge, the technology effectively. But first, we have to agree conceptually about the global order. Because without that, we can't do anything. Does that answer your question, Jerry?
Well, it leads me to the next question, though, and that is, to tame a wild Mustang, you have to some way break them in the sense of they now accept you as the rider, as the boss. And this, in some sense, implies that ever weaker forces must be gathered together and accumulated in some way, synthesized into this global consciousness. And that's where the difficulty of implementation, or in the sense of how do you view this from a constructive notion of the concept of forces?
Well, I don't know. I don't think we know. I don't think we know. I don't think it's possible to know. But this could surprise us. This could just change overnight in a world of social media.
I
A,
agree.
a
I agree.
powerful a powerful idea could go viral and change global consciousness overnight or in a week or two. I don't know.
Laurie,
Yes, I like the chart, but it seems like you're focusing upon what's happening physically, the external social expression, and I think what's deeper than that is the cognitive mechanisms underneath that are driving these various transitions. For example, Industrial Revolution, yes, that was a physical thing, but that was preceded by a scientific revolution, which was a new way of thinking. And
Exactly.
the cognitive thing there was that people could analyze the world rationally rather than using the intuitive type that was used with scholasticism, the Renaissance thinking. Same thing with, let you talk about Trump and that whole thing there. There's this whole thing of postmodernism, which says that, hey, there is no such thing as truth. There is no such thing as a general theory. Instead, everything is a personal opinion. That's the mindset that then laid the foundation that eventually resulted in the external expression that you're talking about here. And I think that there's a deeper progression behind this, driving this in terms of new ways of thinking emerging.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly the point here, that every one of these changes required a revolution in thought. The Industrial Revolution, for instance, required the Renaissance and the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic is what drove capitalism. And we've seen a revolution in thought at every stage. The agrarian revolution, the industrial revolution, the post-industrial revolution, the information revolution, and now I think we're going to see a mental, spiritual revolution in thought. I think it has to, it's just got to happen. It's either that or the world collapses.
Yeah, the focus of my research has been on these cognitive transitions that lie
Yes,
behind what you're talking
yes,
about here.
yes. There is a revolution in thought at every stage of development here, because the technology, every stage in technological development has its own reality and it requires a different consciousness. That's exactly right. Thank you, Lauren. That's a very good point.
Pierre, what's your idea about Alexander Dugin's new theory about the multipolar world? It's kind of a vision of what's coming.
I'm sorry.
Multipolar.
Who?
Alexander Dugin, the Russian scholar, kind of a teacher of Putin. He proposed this thing called a multipolar model of the world.
Oh,
And
multipolar world.
Yeah, and he is very glad these days because Xi Jinping and Putin and Kim are doing some kind of a parade in Beijing right now, showing the force against the United States. So,
Yeah.
what's your comment? I mean, how to put that into your model?
Yes, a multipolar world is here. Absolutely. And that has to be part of global consciousness, that no single nation is going to control this world. That's absolutely true. But we all those powers have to recognize that we live in an interdependent world and that we have to collaborate in our enlightened self-interest. This does not speak to world government. It simply requires the major powers to cooperate in their own self-interest. I think that is going to be the basis for a global consciousness. We retain the rich diversity of various cultures and nations, but they all collaborate out of self-interest. That, I think, is the essence of global consciousness. My book, The One World, describes global consciousness in more detail. There's one more point I want to make that I think will find interesting. One of the things driving this, I think, is the fact that the corporation, I think, is becoming a democratic institution. Now, I know that sounds impossible, but it's happening. The business world, the Business Roundtable, one of the most prestigious American institutions of business, 5 years ago, made a very historic announcement that profit would no longer be the primary focus of business. Instead, they recognized the interests of all the other stakeholders, employees, customers, suppliers, distributors, the public, and so on. That is historic, and it's happening. 90% of corporations try to do that in a crude way. I don't think they understand how to do it, but they're trying to do it because they know it's a reality. Because if they want to survive under these turbulent conditions, they have to deal with the social impacts. They can't ignore them. In fact, I'm trying to encourage that. I funded a project at my university, George Washington University, to encourage stakeholder collaboration. We'd like to get a critical mass of CEOs to learn how to do this. And if we could do that, that would be a model of democratic enterprise that would no longer would be capitalism. Capitalism would be an outmoded idea. Instead, this would be a democratic form of enterprise. In addition, because a democratic enterprise includes the social interests of society, this idea would synthesize the conflict between capitalism and socialism. Democratic enterprise would be a logical synthesis of those two dominant ideologies that have been in conflict for hundreds of years. And there would be variations of that, of course, but there's no inherent difference between capitalism and socialism from the viewpoint of democratic enterprise. It includes both dimensions. So these are the main ideas that I've developed over my 50 years as a scholar, and they're summed up in my book, my new book, One World, and that's my legacy as a scholar. I'm hoping this will I'm hoping it become a bestseller. It seems to me this is what the world needs today. There's so much doom and gloom out there. I mean, you talk to ordinary people, they can't imagine that we're going to survive. They're worried about bringing children into the world. There's a famous survey that shows a majority of people think humanity is doomed. So
No,
I can't tolerate that. And so this book is an antidote to the prevailing
Big
doom and
question
gloom.
mark. Big question mark will help.
Yes.
Bill, I think this is a fascinating idea you're broaching here. Have you tried to apply cybernetic principles to
Well,
the
yeah.
development of stakeholder cooperation among the various corporations?
Well, I don't think they really apply here. I value the stakeholder perspective, but I think it's limited. I don't think it really applies here. Maybe it does. I'm not sure.
Why wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not sure how it does.
Well, Bill, this reminds me back in the time of George Washington University, once Russell Ackoff was in the campus,
Yes.
and you had a fight with him. And I remember Eric Winslow kind of drive Ackoff away. So can you tell us that story and what was the conflict? Because he was also the proposer of the stakeholder
Yes,
system.
that's right. Yeah,
So what happened? Let us know.
yeah, I was close to Russell. We worked together a lot. Uh, and Russell had, I think, the gist of many of these ideas. He proposed that corporations should exemplify free enterprise to the extent that they become internal markets. And I think that's exactly right. And he also saw that the corporation should be democratic in its governance. So he had a lot of these ideas, basically, but he didn't foresee this, I don't think. He didn't see the life cycle of evolution. And the conflict you're talking about is we organized a conference with Russell and his team at GW. And it was a very successful conference. It was a big event. We had hundreds of people come. And Russell gave his talk, and the one of our faculty members, Peter Vale, took exception to what Russell was saying. And he said, "Well, it's a great idea, Russell, but what about cultural differences, other societies, blah blah blah." And Russell took exception to that. He just chewed Peter out, and it really offended Peter Vale. And they had a big argument, and I tried to patch it over afterwards. And it was very unfortunate. It was a really stupid argument. I liked Russell. Russell was a very powerful personality, I thought. I
Yeah,
miss
I
it.
translated one of his book into Chinese, Ackoff's Best, and that was the trigger of this project here.
Yeah.
But I hope all of you can have your best
Yeah.
collection of
Yeah.
papers and ideas
Yeah.
before you say goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in fact, we published a book with Russell's team and I together. We worked together, and we published a book based on the presentations from that conference. And it was, I think, a great book titled "Internal Markets," and it did a great job of summarizing the knowledge about internal markets with wonderful case studies. Well, that's all I want to say. Are there any last comments or questions?
Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, very nice presentation, Bill. Thank you. I just have one observation here. I took Yuval Harari's course when he took his book *Sapiens* and discussed it, presented it as a one-semester course in Stanford. If you look at his chapter headings, it's kind of very similar to the 0, 1 to 3 for some different chapters that you have here. But the interesting thing is he kind of goes right into the gloom and doom scenario. Like,
Exactly.
for example,
Yeah.
this section 6, he would call it as like the hardware explosion and That is how we ended up with the information revolution. So I worked on disk drives for 30 years. I consider that that was a phenomenal contribution to information explosion. We went from a few gigabits per square inch to terabits per square inch without increasing the cost at all. So that really helped the information revolution, the item 6 here. But the interesting thing is item 7 now, I see that as the artificial intelligence or the large language models. Those are the ones that are kind of taking over. So you can think of global consciousness as also as collective human intelligence. That is, instead of calling it artificial intelligence, maybe we can think of it as collective human intelligence and leading to global consciousness. So ideally, if it is a benevolent consciousness, yes, everything is going to be very, very good. But if all the wealth is kind of skewed to a few individuals, and if they think cloning themselves are running their idiosyncrasies as the mantra for running this world, then we are going to go into a bad spot here. So this is a very interesting bifurcation point here. That is the what we call as beyond knowledge maturity crisis. We are sitting at a cusp. So the question is it going to go towards a benevolent society or a feudalistic society run by a handful of billionaires? I don't know.
That's a very good comment, Seshad. That's exactly right. Harari is a dystopian, in my point of view. He sees all of the terrible problems. I don't think he understands consciousness. In fact, he doesn't talk about consciousness. He doesn't understand it. That's his weakness. He thinks that intelligence is everything. It's not. Intelligence is what Maurice called knowledge. It's the objective form of consciousness, but that's only the foundation of consciousness. Above the objective consciousness is subjective consciousness. That's where humans live, values and beliefs and intuition and spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
I think we're going to, in fact, I think we're going to acknowledge that that humans are spiritual beings, not in the sense of supernatural phenomena, but in the sense that the human spirit is something in its own right that cannot be described by intelligence and knowledge. It's the mood, the sense of awareness, and the values and beliefs that people carry. That is spiritual, essentially. Western societies have a hard time accepting the idea of spirituality, but I think it's a real thing, and I think we're going to accept it in time. That will be part of this realization of global consciousness, that we are spiritual beings, and it is a spiritual universe. These are wonderful comments. Thank you all so much. I think I should stop at this point. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Jason.
Okay. Let Morris make some connection between your two models, two perspectives.
Actually, firstly, I apologize. I got lost from the screen for a little while. My computer went down and I had to reboot. So apologies. I like your ideas. They're consistent with what I've been doing. For instance,
they are, exactly.
If you could get to my paper last year called Diagnosing Market Capitalism, it sounds very economically orientated, but it actually looks at the way the paradigms of capitalist paradigms are moving from an individualist to a more collectivist approach, which is consistent with where you're going in this. I think it does a lot of analysis that you might like.
I will look at that. Maurice, could you send me a copy of that by any chance?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll send it to Jason.
I think your ideas are completely compatible with this. In fact, your ideas are the inspiration behind all this. Because you have made the point that consciousness comes first, and then information, and then knowledge, and then material artifacts, and then behavior. That's exactly right. In fact, you could understand the driving force behind evolution in a very fascinating way. This whole process seems to be drawn upward towards consciousness, towards some kind of universal spirituality in the Jungian sense, the thing that Carl Jung talked about. If that's the case, you could see this as a spiritual energy is the source of all of this, and it starts at the flows from the very top of this hierarchy, and then it flows down like waterfall through these various stages into material form. So I think you're exactly right, Maurice.
Now we have.
I've just sent you,
Go ahead.
Jason, I just sent you, well, I've already sent the slides, but I just sent you Diagnosing Market Capitalism in the full paper form and in the slides.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I forward to the group. But before you want to leave, Gerald, we have Gerald as our expert of disagreement. So Gerald, it's time we hear some disagreement from you.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Gerald, I was asking Gerald to say something. Are you
Okay.
there? You're muted. We need some disagreement from you, since you are the disagreement
I'm
expert.
willing to say something, but I don't know whether it's what you wanted. My
That's
comment
why it's called disagreement.
is related to where William started. He said that he doesn't feel anymore that he feels as a person that he has lost a number of abilities and properties as a human being. One of the areas where I'm working is in the question what to do, how to help people who suffer from dementia. They lose a number of their intellectual abilities and other aspects, and then they are considered to be below human. They have to be put away somewhere, etc. A major point that is developing, and there are a number of initiatives there to try and support a different approach, which is whatever the abilities of a person are, they are part of the society. So society should support what you might call what do you call it? Calling, which is engagement of any person in society. And there, I am supporting an organization here in Lincoln where we have some means to provide coffee and company, etc. And so the major issue is that the thinking always, also in the people in that organization, is to put those who suffer from some problem in a separate category and deal with them as a category. And so we have to train the individual people in there to actually think about the clients in a different way. Now, the point that and that was something I was thinking about when William was talking about his mental change. What I see as a revolution is, in fact, that something that was quite common, let us say 10 years ago, and of course longer, is now changing already. So I just wanted to contribute an example of what may be changing in a very strange way, in a way that has never been seen before, which is that individuals in their development are no longer seen as individuals who develop certain or start to lose certain properties, but that they are continuing to be human. and that they are continuing to have the possibility of actually contributing in very many different ways. So I think that's a very nice example of a change that is happening at the moment. That's what I wanted to contribute.
Great, thank you. But by the way, Bill, you are still very energetic, and your voice is perfect. And who is more senior, Jerry? How old are you?
I'll turn 85 shortly.
85. So you're younger. And
Yes.
Morris, how old are you?
80.
Okay, young man. Okay. So our senior professor today is Bill here, and we need to all listen to him.
Okay.
Any more comments and suggestions?
Yeah,
Ram,
I want to
Jerry.
comment here on something because it's grounding and founding and bounding, if I can use those three terms. And this is the concept of abstraction and the role of abstraction in the development of the graph that we have been studying for the last hour. The concept of individuation is profound in the development of societies and cultures. And there must be sort of a rounding off of the individual in order to get the cooperative relationships that exist. And this notion of cooperativity, which is foundational to that graph, depends on the development of ever increasing size and scale of cooperativity, which he wants to extend, or which in his view, capitalism should now expand to include stakeholder cooperativity, etc. So I guess the question then becomes, what is the future of individuality? Is individuality a thing of the past?
Laurie.
An idea on this. Okay, we are individuals. How do we go from the individual to the group? One way is for the individual to become more limited and for all the integration to happen externally through the structure, through society, through the infrastructure of society. The other way is for individuals themselves to take a larger perspective and then for them to be able to cooperate more intelligently as a group. And I think that relates to this bifurcation, this dividing, where if everybody becomes more limited, then the future is not nice. But if individuals individuate and gain an understanding, a more global understanding internally, and then cooperate, then individuality is still preserved and freedom.
The problem with that, oh, go ahead.
I think
Go
that
ahead.
what I tried to say just now is precisely the opposite. What I am saying is individuality is not a time invariant property of people. It is something that changes with the context in which they live. So that means that it is also the context, the community in which they live, which actually makes it possible for individuals to maintain being a member of the community. So it's precisely the opposite of what you say.
Well, Gerard, I agree with yours, and would even put this down at the molecular level, that the individual atoms maintain their identity, and that when they join into a molecule, such as the propeller that we recently had,
Such as club of Remy is a big molecule, right? Right.
But the point is that the cooperativity among all the atoms of the DNA molecule, even though in E. coli there's 1 billion different atoms in that molecule, they all cooperate and act together. And they don't lose their individuality. They still maintain their identity and that, but they have now learned cooperativity. And this is where I have the same arguments with Lauren's proposal. So how does that work? How does that work at the level of societies? How do we modify how do individuals become modified such that the global intelligence becomes an actuatable thing as opposed to merely a concept?
Okay, just a simple example. A kid on solving a math problem, is he going to work out the answer in his head, or is he going to go instantly to the calculator and punch buttons? If he punches buttons, he doesn't have the internal concepts. The external world is providing the integration for him. He becomes a slave to the machine. If he comes up with if he can work out a general answer inside and then use the calculator, now he's the master and the machine is the slave.
That sounds like a topic for another good meeting, Jason.
Yes. Ron,
Just gonna make one
final
statement.
comment, Ron.
Okay.
I'm gonna have
Can you hear me?
I'm gonna have to go.
All experiences are experiential. That means all the information we deduce from our experiences are subjective. So everything is subjective, except that when a collection of beings come to the same conclusion and have the same subjective opinion, then we call it an objective opinion. So everything is subjective. That means you're always individuals. Even in the molecular world or chemical world, the atoms don't lose their individuality, but they all agree on a common schema, and that becomes the activity of that compound, as opposed to the atom doing its own thing or the electron doing its own thing. So the society is formed on an objective basis from a bunch of individuals with subjective notions. That's all I want to say.
That's a very good conclusion. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your time and your energy and very interesting ideas. Let's do this more later.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Bill. Good to see you.